Warning. The following video contains spoilers for Alien Isolation. This game is best experienced blind, and I highly recommend playing it before watching this video. And please go play this game if you're a fan of the Alien films. Lastly, the opinions stated are entirely my own. With all that out of the way, sit back and enjoy. The horror genre, especially in games, is pretty fluid and open to interpretation. Resident Evil, while not creating the genre, catapulted horror into the mainstream. The tone and atmosphere of the originals, in conjunction with pioneering survival horror mechanics, is why the series is so fondly remembered. 3 years later, Konami would join the horror arms race with 1999's Silent Hill 1. Instead of slowly transitioning into an action game like its competitors, Team Silent's Silent Hill game sought to redefine horror through leaning into the psychological aspect of it. Silent Hill games are much more character-driven narratives with a focus on understanding them. The horror is derived from the absurdity, the uncomfortable reality of themes, and sometimes just visceral gore. And while not reaching the commercial success of Resident Evil, Silent Hill was still seen as a horror pillar, as these two IPs would dominate the genre between the late 90s until around 2010. With Konami outsourcing the Silent Hill games after Team Silent was disbanded, and Capcom striking gold with Resident Evil 4, the identity of these franchises began to shift. And while these games weren't all commercial failures, I'd imagine fans of the original entries were a bit conflicted with the new direction. Fast forward to 2010 and Frictional Games, the developers of Penumbra, released Amnesia: The Dark Descent. This game revitalized the traditional horror setting in gaming, but it's largely remembered for ushering in the hide-and-seek horror boom of the 2010s. While there were puzzles and other mechanics that players enjoyed, the game was universally praised for introducing segments where players could only run and hide from enemies. Although this wasn't the first game to do this, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is credited for popularizing this subgenre and influencing a plethora of games like 2012's Slender the 8 Pages, 2013's Outlast, and 2014's Five Nights at Freddy's. And at the time, everyone must have been happy, right? Our survival and psychological horror games were turning into action games, but everything's good now that we have hide-and-seek horror, right? Well, absolutely not. Although this horror genre was becoming more popular, many were starting to miss AAA survival horror games. Some preferred to have ways of defending themselves, and others wanted to hide from a monster pursuing them. And oddly enough, Sega, more specifically strategy game developer Creative Assembly, was listening to the horror community and had a unique opportunity to develop a horror game for almost everyone. In today's video, we'll finally cover Creative Assembly's Alien Isolation and why I consider it a horror masterpiece with a few minor issues. I haven't played Alien Isolation since 2016, but I've been wanting to talk about this game for a while now. I vividly remember the sounds, atmosphere, xenomorph, and loving almost everything about this game. And with Sega and Creative Assembly announcing a sequel after a decade, now might be the best time to talk about it. Now, before we get into it, there are two things that I want to say. All the footage captured for this video was recorded live on my Twitch channel. Please feel free to hit the follow button if you'd like to catch the show live. And two, getting a clear bias out of the way, I'm a huge fan of the original Alien film, Aliens, Prometheus, Covenant, and I can't wait to see Romulus. If you enjoy these films and the Alien series and haven't played this game for some odd reason, and obviously you're a gamer, like, what are you doing? Turn the video off, go play the game, and then come back afterwards. But with all that out of the way, sit back and relax as we discuss Alien Isolation and why it's Creative Assembly's love letter to Alien. The best place to start is by addressing the elephant in the room, so let's talk about how Creative Assembly went from developing these games to developing Alien Isolation. If I said Creative Assembly, what's the first thing that comes to mind? You'll either have no idea what I'm talking about, or you'll know they develop a lot of strategy games and are most famously known for the Total War series. In 2006, Sega received a license to develop the 20th Century Fox game. Alistair Hope, the Alien Isolation creative director, wrote a brief proposal outlining the framework of this strange alien game that he wanted to develop. While the game was clearly a homage to the 1979 classic, Alistair realized most Alien games adopted the action-focused sequel, as publishers and developers thought developing an action game was more fitting for the video game medium. Alistair rejected this notion and believed developing a horror game closer to the original would be a much better fit. And after receiving the green light from Sega's management, they provided him with a budget and a team to bring his vision to life. Development found the team studying the original film every day. The team studied the retro-future aesthetic, the way the film was shot, how the horror was captured, and everything in between to capture the essence of the film. There are numerous reports from the development team citing how they've lost count of how many times they've seen this film since it was on repeat at the studio. To assist their efforts, 20th Century Fox famously sent Creative Assembly 3 terabytes of unreleased Alien footage to help with development. Additionally, Alien Isolation employed Dion Lay, Will Porter, and Dan Abnett to write the story. They were initially stumped in writing this game's narrative because Alien already had established lore and they wanted to bring something new to the table. And after going in circles for probably probably a few days, everyone agreed that they'd put faith in telling a story about the xenomorph. With the story written and a playable section of the game developed, Creative Assembly wanted to have the game play tested, and the results were incredible, and Alistar's quote captures this perfectly.
You know, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I love that game, but I couldn't play it. But that's the thing. It has to deliver on the scares because that's what we set out to do. It would have broken the idea if we'd altered it and made it less scary. Alien Isolation asked the question, how are you going to survive? And yeah, maybe that's too much for some people, but if it was too easy, it would have broken that spell.
Alistar's uncompromising vision for this game is admirable. Instead of scaling back the tension and haunting atmosphere, he understands his vision and refuses to compromise. Alistar's steadfast resolve and the team's dedication would contribute to one of the most memorable horror games I've experienced in recent years. This game's success would eventually transcend the gaming medium and influence Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus. Before Fede, or Fede, I don't really know how to pronounce his name, started working on Alien Romulus, he consumed a lot of media but kept returning to Alien Isolation. He enjoyed the game so much that he included Alien Isolation save points as an Easter egg in the film. This doesn't really have to do much with the game, but I just love when creatives show respect to each other and add a homage or an Easter egg from what actually influenced them. One of the most popular examples of this is seen with the Akira bike slide. With production out of the way, let's discuss Alien Isolation's superb graphics and presentation. I've said this before and I'll probably say it again, but graphics today aren't as important as they were years ago. Yes, games today look better, but when you look at this footage, does it really look that bad? Alien Isolation was released in 2014 and still looks stunning in my opinion. Reflections, lighting, particle effects, the shadows, and the presentation of the Alien universe is sublime. This game is filled with countless moments that can be screensavers and astonishing set pieces as you try to escape Sevastopol space station. Sevastopol looks like something pulled right out of the Alien universe with its retro future aesthetic. This aesthetic comes from the late 70s interpretation of futuristic weapons, technology, sound of alarms, and the soundtrack, which partially comes from the original film. When you combine incredible graphics with a presentation ripped straight from the original film and a developer who's willing to go above and beyond to emulate the world, you get one of the most faithful and immersive games you'll ever play. This should be obvious, but you'll clearly get more out of this game if you've seen the original film. I can't put into words how incredible this game looks and how strong the overall presentation is. Everything looks and sounds like the original film, and it's cool to use weapons, read about characters, and how 20th Century Fox allowed Creative Assembly to contribute to the world of Alien. The only area this game falters is with the CGI cutscenes. Feel free to skip ahead if you've seen any of my previous videos because I think everyone knows how I feel about CGI cutscenes. These CGI cutscenes don't necessarily look bad, but they run the risk of aging poorly. CGI, like all technology, relies on hardware available at the time. As time passes and technology improves, CGI runs the risk of just looking dated. I understand there are technical reasons why developers use these, but having your cutscenes render in engine will help future-proof your game. To be clear, I'm not a developer and I understand that there are reasons that these are utilized, but who knows how these scenes will look in 2034 when the game turns 20. Something that will stand the test of time, however, is this game's incredible score. One of the things that really caught me off guard after not playing this game for several years is this game's incredible soundtrack and use of music. In parallel to the tracks added from the film, the Creative Assembly sound team developed some unsettling tracks accompanying the Xenomorphs and Working Joes. Both tracks are dynamic as they change or play a motif when they're searching, discovering, and/or hunting you. Some of the tracks enhance the dark atmosphere by selling this sense of dread as you quickly and quietly try to escape. Creative Assembly is also perfectly content with having players sit there quietly. Some of my favorite moments during my first playthrough found me aimlessly wandering with no music. In the opening hours when you're navigating Sevastopol, the game is more than okay, silently immersing players into their world. As you listen to the sound effects, the uneasy voice of the Working Joes, faint sounds in the vents, the gentle hum of a save point, your footsteps as you explore, and other ancillary sounds, the creeping reality of being alone starts to settle until realizing everything wants you dead. Alien Isolation's incredible soundtrack and their conservative use of it enhances its staying power and allows your imagination to wander, which is important because the fear of the unknown is often the most unsettling. Speaking of unsettling, let's talk about the gameplay because tense, stressful, and unsettling are probably the best ways to describe it. It doesn't matter whether you play this game on PC, PlayStation, Switch, or Xbox. The most important thing is that you must play with headphones. In addition to the outstanding audio effects and the score, this game might have some of the best sound design I've ever heard. The ambient sounds, doors opening, the sound of firearms, the xenomorph in the vent, and everything in this game sounds incredible. The most remarkable accomplishment has to be with the positional audio. If you put a blindfold on and just listen to the game, I'm sure everyone can pinpoint exactly where everything is coming from. The audio might be your best tool for survival since it communicates a ton of information to players, and even when it's not, the sound alone contributes to this game's haunting atmosphere and adds another layer of immersion. This game might be worth picking up just to listen to it honestly. While Alien Isolation does an effective job audibly providing information to players, its remarkable user interface provides a ton of information to players as well. User interface, or UI for short, is something I haven't really discussed on this channel yet. I think there's an effective way to visually convey information to players, however, this can change based on genre. MMORPGs like World of Warcraft have more information to relay than a game like Alien Isolation. Creative Assembly leveraged a minimalist UI with this game by focusing on the essentials. The bottom left-hand corner has everything you need and doesn't occupy too much space. There isn't a constant arrow or indicator at the top of your screen, mission objectives briefly appear before disappearing, and the map forces you to bring up a separate menu. If you want to pull up a mini-map and see a quest arrow, you can always just use the motion tracker. While the motion tracker obviously displays moving things, it also has an indicator pointing towards your objective. And when you want to switch weapons, you have to choose from your weapon wheel. What I love about these mechanics is that they never remove you from the game. A ton of games either pause or wait for players to make their decision, whereas Alien Isolation refuses to let you leave its oppressive atmosphere. The minimalist UI and the risk of using the motion tracker or changing weapons gets you fully immersed in this game's atmosphere. The only UI nitpick I have is with the map and the design of the weapon wheel. The map is admittedly a bit crowded and the weapon wheel looks a bit generic, but these aren't that important in the grand scheme of things. Anyways, I just wanted to quickly highlight this game's incredible UI because I think it's severely underappreciated. So let's finally talk about the gameplay and what you should be doing outside of staring at walls and just listening to noises. Alien Isolation is broken up into 3 major sections: humanoid sections, xenomorph sections, and hybrids. Whether you're fighting working Joes or humans, you'll engage in a more traditional survival horror gameplay loop without the puzzle pieces and inventory management. When players come across an enemy, they'll have 2 choices: quietly sneak around them or dispatch them with your limited resources. Players will come across resources as they try to escape Sevastopol. While weapons and equipment like the flamethrower and motion tracker have static spawns, the resources players need to craft medkits, flash grenades, noisemakers, and more are all randomized. These dynamic spawns provide the game with more replay value as players will have to fight their fears and explore if they'd like to increase their chances of survival. Another thing players will have to assess is whether it's worth using their resources on humans. I'd imagine most players prefer to save their resources for the xenomorph, but I'm sure we've all had close encounters where we had to use our last noisemaker or something valuable when fighting off the humans. Moments like these exacerbate the genius of survival horror. We're forced to assess how valuable our resources are, if we can craft more of them, the last time we saved, our progress, and whether we should have saved it for something else or the xenomorph. And when you do encounter the xenomorph, the game drastically changes. Before talking about the xenomorph, I'd like to remind everyone that if you're enjoying this video, a subscription and a like would go a far way in helping the channel grow. Thanks for your support, and back to the video. While elements of survival horror still exist when present, Alien Isolation effectively pivots into a stealth game with one of gaming's smartest AI. I'll cover the AI in a bit, but let's focus on the gameplay changes. Since we obviously can't kill the xenomorph, our options are to be quiet, hide, or just distracted. Instead of fighting, all we can do is run and hope we aren't seen. The alien is faster, has an easier time traversing the station, and can end our life in one hit. All we can do is leverage our limited resources and hide as we're relentlessly pursued by the perfect organism. And while this is stressful enough alone, Alien Isolation achieves a new level of tension when humanoid enemies and a xenomorph are simultaneously present. There are numerous levels throughout Alien Isolation where humans will be searching for you while a xenomorph is nearby. Getting discovered isn't the end of the world since you can usually just reposition, heal, or re-engage a fight when you're ready. However, when you're discovered and the enemy starts shooting, it's pretty much over. Humanoid enemies with guns effectively serve as alarms. Sound prompts the xenomorph to attack whoever's making noise and investigate whatever they were engaging with. The alien should be your focus, meaning you need to do everything in your power to remain undetected. While these levels are just high-tension stealth segments, simply bringing them together was brilliant. Unfortunately, these sections may falter when you engage with the humanoid AI. Let's be honest with each other for a second. Alien Isolation's human and synthetic AI is just rough. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the AI in this game's runtime were the biggest issues players had, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I've seen humans and synthetics get stuck on walls, threaten to shoot me while not shooting at me, and just acting buggy. Combat can feel janky as well. The synthetics have a lore excuse for being bad since Seegson is miles behind the company synthetics. Humans, conversely, are much harder to excuse. Alien Isolation's crowning achievement is definitely with the Xenomorph, so let's discuss its AI and what makes it so special. When developing the Alien AI, Creative Assembly strove to embody the ethos of the perfect organism. Calling the Alien one of gaming's most impressive AI would downplay its overall genius. It's been called terrifying, realistic, genius, and other words, but none of these do it justice in my opinion. Creative Assembly achieved this anomaly through leveraging 3 core systems: the Director AI, a node-based behavior tree, and the Menace Gauge. The Director AI is an omnipotent system that tracks your location, what you're doing, how long you've been doing it, which mission you're on, and where the alien is in relation to you. The behavior tree is a flowchart where player inputs directly influence the alien's behavior. Each time you interact with the alien, it gathers data from your tendencies and responds with one of its node-based actions. Lastly, the Menace Gauge is essentially an invisible bar that depletes as the alien searches for you. If the Xenomorph doesn't find you, they'll hop back in the vent and search somewhere else. This was added so players wouldn't get frustrated and be able to, actually progress the game. And I'm happy it's here because we probably wouldn't be able to beat the game without it. Interestingly enough, Creative Assembly hasn't disclosed everything about the Xenomorph's AI, so there are certainly surprises for players to uncover. Before moving on, let's quickly revisit the node-based behavior tree and why I think it's genius. As we've seen in previous Alien films, the Xenomorph is highly adaptable, and Alien Isolation Xenomorphs are no different. Because this AI adapts to whatever you throw at it, each playthrough can feel different as players are responsible for what they're up against. Maybe you want to spend your resources on noisemakers because they buy you time, right? Well, the alien will start tracking where the noisemakers were thrown from. Alright, well, that's no problem. I got a flamethrower, I can defend myself with this, right? Well, the alien will become more resistant to fire each time you use it. I mean, that's not a problem. I can just hide in lockers, right? Well, each time you're caught in a locker, the Xenomorph's likelihood of searching them increases, and this is what I'm talking about. The adaptability of the Xenomorph solidifies this game's tension regardless of how carefully you play it. However you play this game, it will be terrifying, and that's why it's so remarkable. Sure, we can exhaust a bunch of our resources on our first playthrough distracting the alien, but good luck fighting humanoid enemies with your maintenance check, and best of luck escaping Sevastopol with the Xenomorph that searches everywhere, is resistant to everything, and can't be fooled. This vicious loop will eventually prompt players to play Alien Isolation like a stealth game, meaning very slowly, quietly, and deliberately. And despite knowing everything is stacked against us, we'll eventually persevere forward. Something that is stacked in our favor, however, is how the alien moves. Yes, the alien runs faster than us, bullets don't work on it, they attack humans, and have access to vents that we don't, but at least they rarely teleport around the map. I'm sure we've all played games where we're chased by a monster that appears in an inconvenient area. Except for 2 moments throughout Alien Isolation, the Xenomorph won't miraculously appear. The Xenomorph's focus from the first film, and Isolation by extension, is to relentlessly hunt its prey. This creates an exhilarating game of cat and mouse where you're constantly being pursued and rarely ever let your guard down. Knowing the alien moves like us, in addition to everything else we discuss, explains why this game is so beautifully stressful to play. All these factors contribute to feelings of helplessness, dread, and just absolute terror. The alien AI is the cherry on top of this already terrifying immersive nightmare. Nevertheless, this game refuses to let players get comfortable by integrating incredible level design into the mix and including the best save system that I've seen in a horror game. Alien Isolation's opening hours find you in these large levels with a few branching paths. These levels allow players to navigate and handle fights on their own terms. To preserve the tension and ensure we don't get comfortable throughout the game, stages become smaller and more claustrophobic as you find more weapons and resources. This gradual difficulty curve can be seen when comparing the San Cristobal Medical Facility with the Xenomorph's nest under the reactor. The medical ward is this semi-open stage with a circular level design. Because players don't have many ways to defend themselves at this point, we're provided with a plethora of hiding spaces, a conveniently placed save point in the middle, the Molotov blueprint, and minimal one-way paths. This design allows players to hide, position themselves to avoid the alien's pathing, and mostly prevents players from getting stuck. Creative Assembly subtly teaches us how to engage with the Xenomorph, the importance of positioning, how critical listening is, and demonstrates how to ultimately survive in this game. Now compare this map to the Nest and you'll find a stark juxtaposition. Nest, conversely, houses facehuggers, numerous one-way paths, multiple xenomorphs, a terrifying atmosphere, seldom provides places to hide, and forces you to play a minigame in order to progress. This area is probably the most stressful since it's so claustrophobic and filled with so many one-hit deaths if you aren't careful. Furthermore, a xenomorph is always right around the corner if you make any noise defending yourself. The nest is probably where the game peaks in overall difficulty, but it's a mostly great area outside of probably just dying a whole lot. In my Silent Hill 2 video, I criticized Tango Gameworks and other horror developers for relying too much on touch of death moments. Some horror games rely heavily on touch of death mechanics when you're running away from something. Moments like these can be fine so long as the studio provides enough hints for players to deduce a path forward. The issue here lies when players start to die, and after dying the 4th or 5th time, the frustration will likely remove you from the atmosphere as your brain shifts from "this is terrifying" to "this is annoying now." While Nest can be frustrating, it's a fairly short section that doesn't require a ton of backtracking, and it doesn't overstay its welcome either. That said, your patience will be tested every time you die. Listen, I'm clearly biased here, but I'm mostly okay with this since it's short and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Is it frustrating to die in one touch to the xenomorph? Absolutely, but that's kind of the point and one of the reasons they're so terrifying. Something else I love about the level design in Sevastopol is how accessible it is throughout the game. Just to be clear, I don't know anyone who actually just wanders Sevastopol, but it's interesting how Creative Assembly just lets us do it anyways. It gives the game this weird Metroidvania-light feeling. I don't have much critical to add here, I just wanted to call it out, and please let me know in the comments if you just wandered around the station just because you wanted to. I'm genuinely curious if anyone just did this. Something I do have a lot to say about, however, is how we save our progress. So imagine this, you just got through a level that you've been stuck on for a while, all of your resources are exhausted, you narrowly survived a few synthetic encounters, and you hear the xenomorph in the vent crawling away. Pressing forward as you fear for your life, you begin to hear the faint hum of a save point. Excited, you cautiously but expeditiously approach the kiosk, insert your card, or really whatever this is called, I don't know, and wait for your save to process. Earlier in this video, I said this game rarely provides players with moments of respite. One of Alien Isolation's biggest strengths is its environment and overall immersion, and Creative Assembly understands this by rarely allowing us to leave its atmosphere. Hearing the hum of a save point after constantly avoiding death provides players with this light at the end of the tunnel. Hearing this simple hum is so cathartic because it's one of the rare moments where you'll be able to breathe, even if it's just for a few moments. However, the genius of the system is on full display after inserting your key. Upon placing your key in the save point, players will have to wait for a few seconds before receiving the save prompt. These seconds can feel like an eternity since you can die while this is occurring. The fear of death forces players to strategize when we save while fighting this lingering anxiety that something awful will happen. Recontextualizing a save point is a mechanic that players must plan around and earn might be one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen in a game. Additionally, Creative Assembly went one step further by adding a cooldown to these save kiosks. This cooldown prevents players from save scumming, which is a very common occurrence in stealth games. The simple inclusion of a save cooldown adds another layer of strategy to saving. Do you really have to save now? Should I check the room for resources before I hit the button? And other questions will race your mind before committing to that save. With that said, you don't necessarily have to engage with the cooldown this way if you don't want to. Sure, you can sit in a box and wait out the cooldown if you want, but that's boring. And looking at the save system holistically, it's remarkable and feels like a happy medium between more traditional save systems and the ink ribbons found in the original Resident Evil games. Everything we just discussed encapsulates why I believe this system is genius. This fundamental system that exists in most games evolves into a survival horror mechanic that requires strategy and preparation before execution. When taking a step back to reflect on the mechanics, stages, and the AI amongst everything else we've discussed, one word can be used to perfectly summarize Alien Isolation: stressful. And while this may sound like a bad thing, this might be the biggest compliment I can give to this game. I wouldn't be surprised if I got a few gray hairs playing this. Trying to avoid everything in Sevastopol is terrifying. The scream of the alien, the sound of save points, agonizing music, gunshots knowing the alien will be summoned, and constantly dying makes this one of the most stressful yet memorable horror experiences I've played. Everything about this game will cause you dread as you embark on whatever nightmare it throws at you. Alright, I don't have a smooth transition into this next point, so let's quickly touch on some miscellaneous things before talking about the story and issues I'd like to see addressed in the sequel. We'll keep this next part short because I really just don't have much to add here. I just wanted to call out a few things that I thought were really cool about Alien Isolation. For example, if you played on the PS4, there was a setting that allowed the controller to actually listen to you. While this might have been a gimmick, it's pretty cool that you had to stay quiet when you play this game. It almost adds another layer of intimacy to it. Alien Isolation also received a VR version that receives a lot of praise. I can't really talk about this because I don't own a VR headset. And lastly, a huge shout out to Feral Interactive with their outstanding work on the Switchport. Digital Foundry's John Linneman expertly outlined why the Switch version of the game is so impressive in his video. The video description will have a link to the article he wrote for Eurogamer and the video he worked on discussing his findings. With all of this stuff out of the way, let's quickly talk about the story. The first phrase that comes to mind when talking about Alien Isolation's story is fan service. This story was crafted to make sense in the movie's timeline, document the company's rise to power, and explore Amanda Ripley. Creative Assembly even brought Sigourney Weaver to record a message to Amanda. Fans had the chance to explore the alien ship, and we use weapons that are heavily inspired from the movies. Andrea Deck, Amanda Ripley's voice actress, did an outstanding job bringing Amanda's focus yet laid-back nature to life. She does a great job transitioning from this relaxed persona to someone who sounds terrified. The entire cast does a great job, but Andrea was an excellent pick for the lead role. Honestly, I don't have a ton to say about the story. I believe Alien Isolation is more focused on world building than telling a compelling story. I think this is fine though because Creative Assembly chose to set their game between Alien and Aliens. The story had to be relatively self-contained if they wanted to add to the universe. Furthermore, reading and listening to how Seegson's Working Joes failed to compete with Weyland-Yutani Synthetics shows how desperate Seegson was. There are numerous emails pertaining to Seegson struggling to raise funding and constantly being outperformed by the company. And when we finally reach Apollo, the company's true colors show when learning they've prioritized the xenomorph's survival to collect combat data. The plot is filled with plenty of twists and turns as well. I enjoy most of the cast and their voice actors and actresses did a great job, but we all know, especially in an Alien game, to not get too attached to the crew. Other than that, I love listening to the recordings, reading emails, and the abundant use of visual storytelling throughout the game. All in all, this game's narrative is entertaining, but I highly suggest watching the original film since this game is essentially a sequel to that. Knowing who Ellen Ripley is, seeing the xenomorph evolve from facehugger to monster, and getting immersed in the world will only enhance the experience. On the topic of enhancing things, Creative Assembly recently announced they've entered early development for an Alien Isolation sequel. While I clearly love this game, I mean just look at the video, I do have a small list of complaints that should hopefully enhance the sequel if addressed correctly, starting with some gameplay feedback. Although I praised Alien Isolation for harmonizing survival horror with hide-and-seek horror, this game heavily leans towards the latter. The xenomorph isn't a section here and there. Sometimes there's one and sometimes there's two of them. Players should be prepared to die a lot and expect the game to get harder the more you interact with them. Because the xenomorph is present for the majority of the game, I can't recommend this game to people that want the option to fight back. Personally, I respect Creative Assembly's challenge and their cavalier use of one of gaming's best AI. We should be scared, we should be terrified, and we shouldn't feel comfortable while playing this game. Now, the human AI, yeah, I'm not going to push back on that. As mentioned earlier, it's janky and just not a whole lot of fun to interact with. Humans will get stuck on geometry and just move sporadically. Working Joes are fine since, this is lore accurate, but human AI just needs some work. I think if we fixed this and slightly updated the combat, the game would be perfect. Dealing with the AI means we'll have to engage with Alien Isolation's combat. While admittedly very basic, Isolation's combat serves its purpose and similar to the Working Joes, it makes sense. Amanda is an engineer with minimal combat experience, presumably. It makes logical sense that shooting a firearm and reloading feels uncomfortable to her. However, if the sequel follows Amanda's journey, I'd love for her to receive some military training or be prepared for combat. Reloading weapons with a sense of urgency and the ability to holster a firearm with the press of a button would be great. Hopefully we don't play as a colonial marine in the sequel because I think Creative Assembly struck gold with Isolation's gameplay. I'd also like to see Alien Isolation's hacking minigames and all these little things that we play throughout the game just drastically reduced. These minigames, or whatever they're called, aren't bad per se, but they're overabundant throughout this game's duration. I might be going crazy, but the second half of the game feels like Creative Assembly really ramped them up because they're everywhere towards the end. Speaking of game duration, let's address this game's most popular issue, which is, of course, the 15-hour runtime. This comes up in every review, video essay, and other articles, so I won't spend too much time explaining this. Essentially, this game will cause you to backtrack during certain quests. As you progress the game, you'll find items allowing you to travel to new areas like a Metroidvania. The backtracking and runtime have caused many to feel like this game is too long, and you know what? That's 100% fair. In the past, I've criticized horror games for being too long, and Alien Isolation suffers from a 15-hour runtime as well. Horror games in particular struggle with long runtimes because being uncomfortable is critical for their success. Nevertheless, the longer we spend in these environments, the more comfortable and less scary they become. Many horror games also rely on touch of death enemies, which makes frequently dying frustrating and runs the risk of breaking the immersion. Towards the end of Alien Isolation, we spend a lot of time with facehuggers and the xenomorph, both of which will kill you if you're touched. I also agree this game is a bit bloated since Creative Assembly could easily remove areas from the game without impacting the narrative. And despite these issues, the runtime doesn't really bother me. People's reservations make sense, and I won't discredit their complaints. Honestly, I love Alien, I'm really biased, and there's certainly merit to everyone's reservations. The nest, like I said earlier, is one of the most frustrating areas since you're just going to die a ton. And the game is probably too long for its own good, but I love the Alien universe, so I'm willing to look past these shortcomings. I think we all have things that we love enough to look past its flaws, and Alien Isolation is definitely one of those things for me. I'm really excited this game is getting a sequel a decade later, and I hope the original staff has an opportunity to return. I wonder if the sequel is going to take more inspiration from Aliens than Alien this time around. I also wonder what their goals with the sequel are and where Creative Assembly takes the series from here, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. When reflecting on this game, it's pretty crazy to think about what the team accomplished. Transitioning from a strategy game to creating a horror game with one of the most immersive environments and one of gaming's best AI is nothing short of astonishing. Creative Assembly's ability to bridge survival horror with hide-and-seek horror demonstrates how remarkably talented the studio is and how much they understand game design. While these two game design philosophies typically clash, Creative Assembly has struck an unbelievable balance. Although it has problems, sure, but what doesn't? Alien Isolation proudly stands as one of the best horror games that I've ever played. Again, I'm clearly biased because I'm a huge fan of the franchise, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game introduced others to the world and maybe even created a new generation of Alien fans. Alright, best time to record an outro, which is at 8:53 in the morning. Let's go. First things first, sorry if I sounded kind of like nasally throughout this video. I've been fighting over like a little cold, and I don't know why. Like, I'm not sick or coughing or anything like that. It's just like, I don't know, I just sound like nasally sometimes, so sorry about that. Also, if the recording quality, the video, the audio is a little bit different, it's because I am home for the holidays, so hopefully that doesn't derail things too much outside of, just hanging out with the family, which is, not a bad thing at all. And a huge shout out to StepNBrew for lending his voice earlier with the Alistair quote for the channel. Big friend of the channel. He's done a lot of stuff in the background. Definitely wouldn't be here without him. So please check out his Twitch channel if you're interested. What else have I done? Oh yeah, I also made a Blue Sky account if you want to follow me over there for updates, and feel free to obviously join the Discord where I'm usually hanging out. Do stream updates and just, other stuff. I'm pretty active in there, so if you guys ever want to talk, that's a great place to catch me. And a massive shout out to channel members and Twitch subscribers for supporting my creative endeavors. If you want video access, emotes, access to like my scripts and outlines and just other stuff and some other Discord perks, feel free to become a Twitch member or become a YouTube member. A few questions. So what did you think of Alien Isolation? What do you want out of the sequel? Which is your favorite Alien film? Did you enjoy Alien Romulus? Am I crazy for enjoying Prometheus and Covenant? And which version of the game did you play? Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. And I promise we're probably done with horror for and I promise we're probably done with horror for a little bit because I didn't realize that I did like 3 horror videos back to back to back. But don't worry, we're going back on our regular JRPG regular video. Who knows what I'm doing next. So, but yeah, that's all I got. Again, thank you so much for bringing it to the end of the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.